All right. We are ready to get rocking. Thank you everyone for joining today. Super excited to have this webinar. I'm Corey Pearson from Castora, co-founder CEO. Joined today, and we'll get into some bios soon with Kendra Scott and Amperity. And we're super excited. The name of the game. As much as Chris from Amperity and I from Castora love to shout out about how wonderful our respective companies are, what we really care about and what you really care about is hearing from Megan at Kendra Scott. And we know that, and we're cool with that. But we've done a lot of great work together, the three of our companies, and we're really excited to talk about everything with you. We're going to go through some slides. We're going to have some time for some Q&A. We're going to talk about all kinds of good things related to customer data and one-to-one marketing. So first things first, I'll tee up with some intros. First and foremost, our guest of honor today is Megan from the Kendra Scott team. She's the VP of e-commerce and customer analytics. In terms of roles and responsibilities, as you're hearing us talk today, Megan oversees all aspects of e-commerce. That includes web development, user experience, digital marketing. It includes all qualitative and quantitative customer analytics. The name of her game is to drive actionable recommendations across various business functions across the Kendra team. And she's very passionate about keeping the customer at the center of every experience. Kendra is a billion-dollar brand, and prior to what she's doing here at Kendra, she oversaw e-commerce and customer analytics at Club Monaco and managed digital marketing and customer analytics at an Amazon flash sales site. So that's Megan. We can all learn a lot from her, and I think we will today. And we also have Chris Jones, Chief Product Officer at Amperity. Chris has about 25 years of experience delivering products and large-scale services to market over at this small company that a few of you have heard of called Microsoft. He recently co-created and led Healthcare Next, which was an initiative to drive healthcare innovation through AI and cloud computing. And prior to that, he drove product development efforts for OneDrive and SharePoint. So a lot of big data enterprise applications in Chris's expertise. And then finally, I'm Corey Pearson, CEO, co-founder of Castora, and Castora's customer intelligence platform. And our name of the game is in taking great customer data and helping folks, taking data from places like Amperity and helping people like Megan get access to those rich customer insights that she can use and deploy across her marketing channels. All right, that's enough talking for me. So we're here today because customer data is a problem that everybody talks about. It's a challenge, it's an opportunity. We all know the kind of, at this point, tried and true and trite statements about how, we need a 360-degree view of our customer. We got to target her wherever she is, right person, right message, right time. We could probably, all of us, go on like a little freestyle rant about all of the terms around CRM-related initiatives. There's so many buzzwords, but the reason there's so many buzzwords and we're still talking about it is it's a really hard problem to tackle. Customer data is fragmented all over the place. We have more customer data than ever. It's also really, really important to deliver relevant experiences. Customer loyalty is harder today. Customers have more choices. And all of this stuff kind of mashes up. We're in this like super siloed, channel-centric world. We all know the basics of business are you got to do right by your customers. You got to grow lifetime value. And hence, all of the technology and all of the focus on customer analytics, customer data management, customer data platforms, and so on. And so this is a great session today because Megan at Kendra has really spearheaded some efforts. I think Kendra is one of the brands that is on the forefront, one of the leaders in how they've been able to take control of customer data. And so that's why we're here today, is for Megan to share her story. As I mentioned, we'll have some good Q&A after we get through the stuff. With the deck and the recording will all be shareable. And with that, I think we'll get into it. So, Megan, I'll pass it over to you now to take it away and share a bit more about Kendra.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So I'd love to start by just telling everyone a bit about the Kendra Scott brand. Kendra Scott is a fashion jewelry company based in Austin, Texas. Kendra started the company in 2002 when she started designing fashion jewelry in the spare bedroom of her home. What she had realized was that there was a gap in the jewelry market. There was a lot of places to go and get inexpensive costume jewelry, but the problem with that product is that it often broke and it didn't last very long. And between the inexpensive costume jewelry, at the other end of the spectrum, there was expensive fine jewelry pieces. Kendra realized that there was a need for product that was really in the middle, product that used genuine stones, genuine shells, and real metals, and was in unique shapes. This is what she went about creating, high-quality fashion jewelry product. Kendra worked really, really hard to get her jewelry in boutiques and in department stores, and eventually she opened her first store on South Congress Street in her home of Austin, Texas in 2010. Since 2010, Kendra Scott has built almost 100 stores across the country. We have our own company website, and we remain in boutiques and department stores. And as Corey said, the brand is valued at $1 billion. In the past year, we opened our first store in Soho in New York City, which was really big for us, and opened a new flagship here in South Congress Street. There are several parts of the Kendra Scott experience that really stand out. As you can see on the slide, we've got a picture of our new South Congress store, and you can see some pictures of our in-store experience. Kendra really believed in creating a retail experience that was different. She found the jewelry shopping experience to be really intimidating. You'd go into a store and it was dark and all the product was in cases, and if you didn't know what you wanted or if you had questions, you could be really, really intimidated. So Kendra went about creating beautiful in-store experiences that were welcoming and warm and less intimidating, allowing our customer to try on the product and have a really great conversation with a stylist in stores. Today, we've enhanced our in-store experience even more with in-store events like having music and yoga and fun installations like balloons or a Jersey mural where you can go and take your picture. And in our South Congress store, we've created a Sips and Sweets destination, which is a place where you can go get wine and frosé and sweets and sit on a patio while you enjoy your shopping experience, or if you just want to sit out in Austin on South Congress Street. We also, as part of our experience, really believe in customization. In the early days at Kendra Scott, what would happen is people would be at work and they'd want to create a piece that would match their outfit for the day, and they'd go into the design room and create a piece of stones that would work for them. And this experience of being able to customize something on the fly is what drove our color bar experience in stores, where you can create a piece of jewelry that allows you to put your own stones into a piece of jewelry. Another really important part of the brand are our 3 pillars. Kendra Scott built the brand on 3 pillars of fashion, family, and philanthropy. And every year, Kendra Scott donates millions of dollars doing Kendra Gives Back events where community members can come into a store and host an event where a portion of the proceeds go to that charity. It's been a great way to allow us to build relationships with our community members and do good. As we've grown, we've remained focused on understanding who our customer is and why they're shopping with us. And as we've grown, we've had to do a lot more to really build and take advantage of this understanding, because it wasn't just about customers here in Austin, Texas anymore. It's about customers across the country, and there are a lot of things that vary by customers. We've learned that we have a very, very broad customer base. We have a customer base that includes young girls in college. We have new moms, young moms, and then we also have an older demographic. What we know is that what these customers buy varies, and why they buy varies, and how they buy varies. And so it's important to us to understand this and also to act on this information so that we can give our customers the best possible experience. In doing this, we've experienced some of the common blockers to one-to-one marketing, and these won't be a surprise to many people in the room. First and foremost, difficulty unifying customer data. So we have a place where we have our POS data from stores. We have a place where we have our orders from the website. We have another place where we have clickstream data from the website. And we know that there was a need to consolidate this data to really get a clear view of who our customer was. We also knew that there was difficulty defining the customer lifecycle. So the interesting part about a brand like Kendra Scott is that you have some customers who are buying very, very frequently because they're wanting to be on trend and they just love to buy jewelry. But you also have some customers who are only gifters. For example, our male customer who's only likely going to be buying on a birthday or a holiday of someone in his life, and major holidays, like I said. And so we knew that the customer life cycle was different for these types of customers. And so we knew that we needed to think differently about, and not just have a one-size-fits-all approach to where if someone hasn't shopped us in 90 days, that means they're a lapsed customer. We also faced the blocker of difficulty scaling findings. So there was many times where we could say, let's understand this one thing about the customer, but we needed to be able to learn a lot of different metrics about our customers and then be able to apply those in an easy way. So we realized there was some difficulty scaling what we were learning. And then lastly, we need to use the information. And when I started at Kendra Scott, we definitely didn't have systems set up where you could easily transfer a file from our data warehouse to Facebook or to Castora or to any of the other multiple places where you'd want to send the data. So we faced all of these one-to-one blockers. And so we knew what we wanted to do. We could see that there was a place to be able to use this type of information. We knew, like, we want to be able to target best customers. We need to know who they are and people who are lapsed, right? We could see the path that it could go to Facebook, it could go to display, it could go to our website, to our store associates, email, and paid search, that there were so many places where we could use this information to make sure that we were talking to that customer the same way across channels, but we just knew that we needed some tools to help us do this, and that's where Castora and Imperity came in.
Awesome. And so thanks, Megan, for the intro and for kind of the backdrop on this. And now, Chris, talk to us a little bit, right? We have a slide here that kind of lays out from the raw data that Kendra had, how you representing the Imperity team, and then I could talk a little bit about the Castora side, how we fit into the mix to help Kendra achieve the goals that Megan was just chatting about.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And Megan, this is just a great introduction to the problem space that you're dealing with and the goals that you had. Really, the focus that we had on Imperity is solving the first couple of problems that Megan talked about, which is all this customer data exists across these disparate systems, and it's messy, so it's hard to unify it together. And so the focus of Imperity is really making it very fast, flexible, intelligent, and easy to bring that customer data together and to create that truly comprehensive view of the customer. We do that using machine learning technology that hasn't really before been available, that automatically finds those connections between customer records. In the case of Kendra, it might be point of sale customers and web shopping customers, being able to match those records together and then use that matched set of records to create a unified customer view. So you have a fantastic view of your customer, including where they buy, how often they buy, how frequently they purchase, what their total lifetime value might be, and other kinds of attributes like, do they shop with you only online? Do they shop in the store? Is the purchaser different than the person that is the shipper of the product? That's the case of the male purchaser in the Kendra example. And then we make that data available easily to marketers and to analysts for download and use. The example Megan gave was download to Facebook. That user interface is straightforward. But we also make it available to tools like Castora that are really focused on taking fantastic data and making it actionable for the marketer to drive and focus on particular types of use cases, as well as some of the other interesting things that Castora does to find new insights about customers that might help you decide what next action to take with them. So the Imperity focus is really in the middle of this equation. Take all the data, unify it together, create a comprehensive customer profile, and then make it available to systems like Facebook or Google for advertising, as well as to systems like Castora that specialize in specific types of actions that enable the marketer.
Awesome. And to kind of round out or maybe double click into to some of those use cases, on the Castora side, in the context of some of these things that Megan was talking about, I think an example would be something like maybe flagging customers who are fading away, right? Where what you have here is, obviously, if you think about a customer and all of the different places that a Kendra Scott customer could interact across various systems, in the store, online, et cetera. And Parity does a wonderful job of figuring out, hey, this was actually Maddie. And this is, Maddie all over the place. We find out, hey, we've got a central one record for Maddie now. So I can actually analyze her to like as a single human being, even though she's purchasing across all these channels. Where the Castora models come in and saying, you know what? We can use machine learning, artificial intelligence, or as I like to simplify it, really good math to figure out, Maddie was usually a customer that was buying at Kendra every single month. And Maddie's been quiet for 3 or 4 months. So without needing to put a rule in place there, we can flag with algorithms that Maddie's veered off. She's starting to cool off, and tee that up for Megan to maybe take an action, a churn prevention action, the moment Maddie starts to fade away just a tiny bit. And so just a little bit of color here in terms of the identity resolution and some of the specialization that Chris referred to. And this ecosystem together has been a whole lot of fun to work with. So now back to Megan. Talk a little bit, Megan. I think there's probably a lot of folks on the line that are in a similar position to you or thinking about similar challenges. You've got like the wild west of customer data out there. You're trying to get control, and you made the decision to pull in someone like Amperity and to pull in someone like Castora and leverage them together. So talk a little bit to us about that and how life has gotten better and how you're able to achieve more now with those things in place.
Yeah. So really the comprehensive customer database is one of the biggest benefits of Amperity. So we have this table now so that, when you send over the data, you send over the transaction information, and that's super, super useful and super great. But at the end of the day, there's times when you just want to understand something at the customer level and kind of roll up bits and pieces of all of the information from all of those different tables. What Amperity allows us to do through their Customer 360 table is to best identify which customer records should be grouped together, because there's always cases where you have multiple records per customer. Allows us to group those customers together, but then also allows us to add in different metrics on those customers. The one that is always like, yes, we have this makes life so much easier, is a simple metric like first order date or last order date that then allows us to say, is this a new customer? Is this an existing customer? Where in the past we would have to go in and write a query where that it would have to go through all of the information for the customer to identify that customer's first order, to then identify if during this past quarter they were new or existing. A lot of too much detail there, but basically having one row per customer really allows us to speed up how we can understand our customer base, because we can run information against that. And just being able to have a system that allows us to determine who a single customer is in a really smart way, because in retail, there's a lot of room for mistakes. On the website, you're entering your own information, you're putting in your email address, you oftentimes have an account, so e-commerce data can be really clean, but when you're going into a store, there's an associate working on the other side of the desk, and they might not be sure, it might not be clear if that's Brian with an I or Brian with a Y, and Amperity can take those types of things that would in many cases be broken out as separate records in other systems and put them together in a single record. So that's a really, really big benefit, so you get a better understanding of who your customer really is. A flexible platform. I can't say enough how many times on our team we'll go to Amperity and say, we'd really like a field that does this, and it's a calculated field based off of other information. Being able to add in those additional fields quickly is a huge, huge benefit of what Amperity and their team can provide to us. Also, they work with us to add in data from additional sources. So this includes metropolitan area data or data from third parties like Axiom, and really be able to really flesh out that entire view of our customer. This is a big one for me. So Imperity does have tools in there that allow you to do drag and drop segments. I'm a heavy customer analytics person. That was my background from when I started with retail. So for me, I always ask, well, can I write the query myself? Because I do think there's many, many, many cases where you want to create binomial data, you want to say yes or no, you want to create groupings. And so when I'm looking for a tool where I'm putting all of my data, I want to be able to write queries that do what I'd like them to do. So Imperity allows us to do that, where we can easily write SQL and get the data the way that we want it to look. Also, Imperity has rapid processing speeds. I've worked across databases, across a number of companies, and there's always those times where you have to try the data, start the query to run, and then come back 45 minutes later. That's just not the case with Imperity. You'll most times have queries back honestly within 10 seconds, and if it's something that takes a long time, it's more like 30, which is a huge benefit. And then also the easy syndication of segments. So you'll see this across both Imperity and Castora. As a marketer, and there's a need for, sometimes we build segments out of Imperity and sometimes we build segments out of Castora. So the fact that Imperity also allows us to easily send segments to different channels is a huge benefit for us.
Awesome, thank you, Megan. And then, so I think a lot of the things you just talked about, I know from our side, right, they're not things that, and our being Castora, there's a lot of things there that, of course, we also love as much as you love when the data is clean and when the processing is quick and you have, any sort of rich analytics and actions are only actions that you're going to take on the data is only as good as the quality of the data and the reliability of the data underneath. And so you've got a lot of functionality there, right, from Imperity, getting the data together, some syndication capabilities, some SQL capabilities. So talk a little bit, the other half of this screen, because you kind of looked at that and it got you a long way, but you also thought, hey, there's more that I can do to take action on the data. So talk a little bit about where the Castora side then sits on top of Imperity and how that, what you're able to do with Castora in the mix as well.
First and foremost is predictive analytics. To be able to do predictive analytics, to really be able to assess at an individual customer level whether someone's going to be high value in the future based off of their first order, whether or not they're last, and what products they might buy, we would have to hire a data science team. And so that's one of those things where you do balance, would I want to bring that in-house, or do I want to have someone do that for me? And Castora, the great thing about Castora is you send this information over and the model's there. It's so quick to get up and running, and it's real predictive analytics. I think many of us have been in a place where we've used those simple terms of, well, I know my average time between orders is 90 days, let's choose 90. But we have to be better than that. We have to respond to individual customers. And it's the predictive analytics tools through Castora that allow us to do that. And when you get running with Castora, it's not just like you get one model and then you're going to go on to the next model. It's like you get going and you've got your high value model, you've got your lapse model, and then you've got product affinity models. And it's not just, you can break that down by any sort of way that you want to based off of your product hierarchy. And to be able to create those individual models at having your own data science team would take a really long time. So it really just speeds up that process. Another important thing about Castora, which I just absolutely love, is the ability to do test and control groups. We always have to understand what's the incrementality of our action when we're sending segments out to other places, and when we're running paid social campaigns, or we're running emails, or we're running direct mail. And one of the hardest things is being able to have a place where you can store that test and control group. So within Castora, you set up the segment and you let it run, and then those groups are held and the results automatically populate. Many, many years ago in my career, I ran direct mail, and I would have to spend a lot of time going back and running the results a month after the direct mail piece goes out. It's just there. That's awesome. That's just such a benefit to us, to allow us just to go in and see what happens. And then same thing as Imperity, we're also able to send segments across different channels. We send them to email, display, to customer service and in store. So we're really able to send this information, this predictive analytics, out to other folks. And even as we were talking, I had to resist the urge to go and check my Castora account on my computer, because there was something we were really excited about. But for example, one thing, how these systems work together really well is we just made a change in our product hierarchy. Based off of that change, we were able to easily go into Imperity, make a change to how the product hierarchy was getting sent to Castora, and then within 1 week, we are able to use that new product hierarchy in product affinities in Castora. That's something that would take months without these systems, if we were just dependent on getting that done. So I think it really is something that allows us to have faster speed to market.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. And some themes that I keep hearing you mention as you're going through both of these things: speed, right? Speed for you to access the data, speed for you to get the identity resolution, the cleansing, the ability to process data quickly, get the models quickly. I think there's so much we hear about too, like for all of the talk of needing to know your customer and keep up with her. The reality is, because of the siloed nature of customer data and the amount of time and energy that has to go into running these models, it's kind of impossible without some of these technology things in place. Of course, spoken from one of the people who's building one of these technology companies, but it's great to hear you talk about the importance of speed. So very cool. So as we were chatting, I think we're now going to shift over into the Q&A part, and some questions have already come in, directed, some of these at Megan, some of these all around. But to kick some of that off, Megan, question came in about a couple of concrete examples of things you're able to do now, that you could do now that you have these tools in place. Maybe it's one of the tools or both the tools together, but just what kind of opportunities were unlocked if you're able to be specific about a couple of specific types of campaigns that now you're running, or you're running in a much greater way than you used to run?
Well, for us, we have a lapsed customer campaign now. We had one before, but this is really about making it more accurate. So that's been a really big win. But models like a one-time customer who's at risk of lapsing, that's not something we necessarily would have been able to identify on our own without the predictive modeling that Castora was doing. So that's something that we were able to put in place. And product affinities are another thing where we're able to say, okay, and you're also what is so great about Castora is that you're able to make things very specific to you and your use case. And it's so important to have business owners and marketers involved in this process, because you're always thinking about how can I use this information. And so product affinity campaigns are something that, if left to our own devices, we would just say, well, what you bought before is what you will buy again. But with predictive analytics, we can actually say, maybe someone that bought necklaces, their next thing is that they'll buy earrings. And so we're able to use a better way of predicting who would buy earrings to set up those campaigns. So we're using these segments everywhere. On our team, we're basically have built out a model that said, we started with email and said, okay, how can we use these segments in email? And then we've now taken that out to paid social, and we'll continue to use these segments also to help in store and to help on the website. So it's really something where we've taken a really measured approach and added in them in everywhere, to that they're such an integral part of our marketing campaigns at this point.
Awesome. And now a couple questions coming in. There's one question, Megan, this one's for you. We talked about all the raw data sources. We talked about Amperity, building the golden customer profiles. We talked about Castora enriching some of the intelligence, but there's a whole thing that kind of happens afterwards on the campaign management side, and other maybe data visualization tools that you might use. So the question came in, just wondering how you fleshed out the marketing stack, of course, with things that you're able to share, but how do you make the whole execution piece of this thing roll cleanly as well?
I have an amazing team. That's what really, really helps out with that, and a team that's really dedicated to learning about this tool and using it. So we have we have on our site merchandising and our email team, we have 2 team members who are really, one team member in particular who really thought through, here are the different segments and here's how we're going to start to use them in email. And then so we're basically, those team members are working together to figure out how do we best use them there. And then I have another team member on our digital marketing team who we've brought into the mix. It's really been the power of teaching people what we have available so that they can see how they can use it in their areas has been probably the most important thing. It really hasn't been about having fancy tools downstream from these tools. It's really about having people who are excited and committed to using what we are gathering here.
That's awesome, and I love I love that answer in part because I think that it's and we're the guilty ones here as the technology people, where we are like, sometimes we overstate the value that I think we can drive, and there's so much importance in the people side, and it will always be that way. Like marketing is always going to be a blend of, technology is an enabler, it's an accelerator, but like the real people that are driving the ship are the marketers. And so it's a good reminder, and thanks for sharing the detail too, because I think there's a lot to be learned thinking about how to build a team to take advantage. If you talk about wanting to take control of customer data, it isn't as simple as they plug this tool in, plug that tool in. A lot of it does have to do with the team structure. And so that's awesome. Here's a question, and Chris, this one might be for you. And it came in about, is there a minimum customer count and data collection? When you guys think about running your machine learning engine, and it's probably part of a broader theme too, in terms of like, how big do you have to get before you do this kind of thing? And a similar question is getting started. What kind of investment is needed when you think about putting this type of infrastructure in place? And so I'll bounce that to you first, Chris, and then I can tackle it from the Castora side as well.
Great. The interesting thing that we found in working with customers is sometimes this whole process seems very overwhelming. I want to build a unified customer view, and you start to think, oh, I've got to get all the data together, and then I've got to build the exact right profile for the customer, and a year later I'll be able to get started. And we work very differently. The way we like to start, and our collaboration with Kendra is a good example of this. We try to start by focusing on a particular set of business use cases and then figure out the exact right amount of customer data to ingest to land that use case. A typical way to get started is, let's just take my point of sale data and my e-commerce data and link those things together. And then let's see if I can't improve my return on ad spend or my email retargeting because I've got better profile attributes. And once I've got that up and running, and that can be as little as a couple of months to get up and going, once I've got that up and running, then as Megan talked about, curiosity starts to take hold and you start to ask questions. What if I added this other data source? What more could I know? What other use case could I drive, and how would I deliver some more business value out of that? What other attribute do I need to know about my customer? And the nice thing about the Amperity product is it works in that iterative manner with customers so that, and I love, Megan, how you talked about this, curious customers who want to do more to serve their consumers then drive the right next set of things that the Amperity product delivers to inspire that creativity and have them be able to act to do better work. And that's how we see the whole product unfolding in the relationship with Kendra or with any of our other customers. Start with small use cases, get the right minimum customer data into the system, and then curiosity, business results, and feedback drive the next set of changes.
That's awesome, Chris. And in terms of size, is there a size like where you would recommend, and I'm sure every business is a little bit different, right? There's no such thing as like a hard and fast rule. But if we've got some folks on the line here who are thinking a little bit about, hey, is my business big enough yet? Or is this maybe the kind of thing I should wait until I'm, have X number of customers or records? Any like broad guidelines that you have in your side of the world at Amperity?
I think typically we're dealing with medium to large size organizations that have a lot of customer data. And typically the ideal customer for us is a customer that has data from a couple of different sources that have customer identifiable information. So that tends to be the sweet spot for us. We like to start at any point though in that spectrum. So we have customers that are as large as the Gap and huge numbers of customer records, all the way to customers that are smaller size customers that have an aspiration to grow. In the end, I think the most important thing for us is that the brand and the customer is very committed to knowing and understanding their consumer and serving them better, and has a real desire to use that unified customer view to drive loyalty and retention. That to us, more than size, is the key differentiator in what a good fit for Amperity would be.
Yep, cool. Another question coming in here. How do you look at retention, and is there a way in Castora to measure retention rate and talk about campaigns to retain customers? So it's kind of piggybacking, Chris, on the point you just made about loyalty and retention. And Megan, maybe I'll take some of this answer, and then I think it's also probably good for maybe you to chime in terms of how at Kendra, your team has rallied around retention metrics. At Castora, what I would say is there's a lot of different metrics that you can look at when you look at the broad concept of customer retention. I think the industry norm is to kind of go to a thing like, hey, how many customers in the past 12 months made a purchase? That's like my 12-month active. And that's fine and meaningful, but there's a lot more you can do to dig deeper there and to uncover trends. You can look at cohorts and how cohorts, say customers who joined at different points of time are keeping up their engagement to see if things are trending better or worse. We have metrics around, we call it the early repeat rate. When you grab a new customer who makes purchase number one, what percentage of them turn into repeat buyers, say by the 90-day mark? That's not your overall, 1 to 2 time buyer conversion rate, but it's a good leading indicator of how well are you converting customers from purchase 1 to 2, so that the marketing team, as they start iterating and testing, you get some quick feedback there. So there's really metrics all across. You can have metrics for how well you're doing at saving customers who are starting to fade away, how well you're like reactivating long gone customers. I think the name of the game there is coming up with metrics that represent different life cycle stages, different aspects of retention, in a way that you can then start launching activities to improve things and get feedback in a quick manner. Megan, how about, at Kendra, because you guys are so obsessed with customers, can you share anything about how much spotlight retention themes and metrics have in your strategic meetings, and if there are any specific stats that you look at? I guess I should have stated the obvious one, like lifetime value. Obviously, the higher your retention rates, the more lifetime value grows. But how has retention seeped into like the metrics and decision making process over at Kendra?
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, this has been super important to me to make sure that we're talking about our business from a customer perspective. I think a lot of times at retail companies, you think about it from the product perspective or those immediate sales. But really, at the end of the day, your business is made up of getting new customers and retaining existing customers. And so putting a customer view side by side with that product-based view is really, really critical. So what I would say is I don't necessarily use Castora as my only source of health of our business or health of our customers, but what we do is we create reports in Amperity using the SQL writing tool that allow us to see what is our retention rate, what is our of customers who shopped last year, how much have they shopped this in the most recent 12 months. And we use those metrics and we look to see of our best customer groups, is their sales per customer growing, is that decreasing? So it's basically what I would say is Castora is the tool that allows us to apply tactics to try to impact the metrics that we're reviewing using reporting in Amperity. It's not one or the other.
Yep, perfect. There's a theme here too, a question that's come in on the topic of customer acquisition. It's interesting because we're talking about, customer data platforms and identifiable users. And of course, in the world of customer acquisition, some of the prospects out there, we don't know who they are yet. There is no record in the database as of yet. And so, Megan, maybe I'll first ask you at Kendra, right, sitting on all of this customer data, have you taken some of these insights and applied them to the lens of customer acquisition? And if so, how? And then, I'm also happy to share a little bit on how we've seen some brands do so as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Facebook makes it really easy through doing lookalike modeling of who your customers are in your database. So that's a really straightforward way of how we're using data from Castora to help drive acquisition. And it's also about understanding those first-time customers. By understanding them, you can also show them better creative that's going to more likely align with what they're going to buy. So you can learn a lot about who those customers eventually, what they'll do when they buy, to make sure you're showing them the right messages.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the Facebook custom audience. I think Facebook was like the first of the media channels that where custom audiences started really catching on, and now we see it pretty much everywhere, right? Like the notion of first party data onboarding in ad tech, but that sequence of, hey, I've got a group of customers, maybe you take just recently this quarter, who are the customers that are predicted to be high value customers, right? Who's on track to be my best superstars? And you take that seed and you plant it in Facebook, as you said, and build a lookalike on it. Maybe plant it in Google and change some bid rules to find, have Google find and pay more search engine marketing for the customers who are great. There's a series of things like this, even display now, right? Depending on your DMP or partnerships with the live ramps of the world, where you can really translate your first party segments into that. But the primary mechanisms there are those lookalike seeding. There's also just the high level of just analyzing LTV by digital channel, by campaign, just knowing, we've had brands that have said, turns out our affiliate customers we acquire through affiliate partners, this affiliate partner over here is great, getting us some great customers. This one over here, man, all those customers stink, right? They don't stink, none of our customers stink, but they stink in the way of like, we lost margin on them and they never came back. So maybe we want to cut that. And so there are a number of ways that, it doesn't get into specific like personalization of the of the anonymous user out there in the internet wilderness, but there's still a lot that you can do. So cool. So another question here has to do with some mistakes, and actually, Chris, I think this one's really targeted towards you, coming from one of these users who has likely undergone some projects in identity resolution and customer 360 before, and he's wondering common mistakes that people make maybe with like rule-based approaches. You mentioned that the machine learning algorithms can really speed up and increase the quality of creating these golden records. Have you guys found in your time that there are, some common rules that maybe people are using that it turns out are often, maybe you're collapsing users that you shouldn't, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we see a couple of common mistakes that people make. I think the first one goes back to some earlier discussions we were having, is that they don't have a business outcome in mind and aren't clear about the thing that they're going to do with the data. So in that case, what we find is that people end up creating the wrong kinds of views, and then they're not sure how to action on them, and so they don't get the return on investment quickly that they need to keep the project going. So that would be thing number one. Thing number two is that lots and lots of these systems require the customer to actually write the rules themselves. And so what you end up finding in a lot of identity resolution projects or data unification projects is that you've got people in your organization that actually are going and hand updating rules to do matching. Are these email addresses the same or close enough? Are these names the same or close enough? And every time they need to make a change, they have to go and edit one of their rules. And the nice thing about the Amperity approach is that because we're doing the matching using machine learning, our rules adapt to your data, and actually you don't have to do those hand updates anymore. And the other nice thing about the Amperity approach is that in a lot of systems, the mistake that people make is they get the data unified in a particular place, but it's not accessible to everybody. And so then you have a problem where it's trapped in some data warehouse and it's not available to the marketer or the analyst or to a tool like Castora to be able to go and action on. And so the other thing that's critical is making sure that the data is accessible to the people who are driving business results and business outcomes. So those are the three basic mistakes we see people making. One is not to have a clear business outcome. The second is to have hand-based rules where you're using complicated logic and loading and updating them on your own rather than relying on machine learning to bring them together. And the third is not really making sure the data is accessible to the business users that are going to go drive the results for your business.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question here has to do with, Megan, you mentioned something about the difficulty in scaling findings. This is one of those, no offense to my buddies at McKinsey, because, you know, like they're great people, but I know, you know, it's common, you know, insights at scale, embed insights all over the org. It's a common thing to say those things. And the thing is, you know, they say because it does make a difference, right? When you actually, there's a big difference between, you know, somebody ran an analytics project somewhere internally, sent it to somebody who nodded in agreement and they high-fived each other and they try to make something happen and then it kind of fizzles out, versus having that insight and that intelligence at scale through the org all the time. But it's easier said than done. You know, maybe that's why they pay, you know, McKinsey the big bucks to go after that stuff, right? But you talked about making some progress about, you know, maybe without, you know, like such a heavy organizational transformation kind of thing, like the blockers, the difficulty when you want to scale findings. You mentioned having some folks on your team to help with some of the things that aren't conquerable from machine learning alone, but can you also talk a little bit about you know, what you had to do in order to build this culture? You know, was it already primed? You know, did you have some blockers in the organization who are maybe really passionate about the product-centric way of doing, you know, X, Y, Z? And maybe at your company, because you guys are such a unique brand, maybe it was primed, but I know you've worked in a number of places and you have a number of colleagues. So if you're talking to somebody who's saying, hey, I kind of sip this Kool-Aid, I want to get customer insights scaled in more places, like how do I overcome these organizational barriers to get this stuff used at scale?
I feel like it's a little bit like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like you just have to keep trying till you find something that sticks. It's different in every single organization. And so, you know, we'll have days where we'll share information with people and then the next day people will act like they never heard it. But then you'll also have days where you really feel like you won and you'll hear your CEO speaking to something that you shared. And so it really is, there's not a one size fits all approach, but it's about being persistent and listening and finding ways that you can produce analytics that help people answer the questions that they're already asking.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, Chris, and this one is coming from someone who's asking about, from your point of view, in terms of if somebody is getting into one of these initiatives, you know, they're thinking about pulling in a CDP, you know, such as yourself. And I think you touched on some of this before, but maybe to go a little bit deeper, to line up the organization for success, right? So, you know, you talked a little bit about use cases and having use cases in mind, but if you were to kind of prescribe like maybe the playbook, hey, I'm here, I've got a mess of my data. I know that I need a piece of technology like Amperity to get control of my data, but I also want to, 12 months from now, be able to tell my boss, look how much better the world is, right? Like when you kind of guide organizations through what to do on top of that data, are there any high level things that that you guys tend to go, in terms of like a roadmap to an organization that kind of extends maybe beyond specifically what the technology that you guys provide do, but just maybe as a CIO or, working together with a CMO or whatever it is that set an organization up for long-term success to use the data as well?
Yeah, that's a conversation we're in with customers all the time. And the thing that we try to do is to really work with the customer to balance two things. Number one, almost everyone we talk to has a passion for serving their consumers better, the people who transact with them better and doing a better job. And they have a desire to invest in something. I'm hearing a little background noise. They have a desire to invest in something that's going to be durable over time. And so this notion of building for durability is very, very important. But also in parallel, recognizing you got to put some short-term wins on the board that are really going to go drive business results. And so typically with our customers, we'll run a use case workshop where we'll try to walk through those short-term wins. And I'll divide them into a couple of basic buckets. One win is just the savings that an IT department might get on having to do all this work themselves, the hours to write these custom rules and maintain and update the systems and create that unified view. A second win is real material return on ad spend by doing better targeting, better lookalikes. Megan talked about this on Facebook, just better lookalike campaigns because you've got more accurate customer data. A third thing is better email marketing that does transactional types of interactions with customers to do a re-engagement campaign, a retention campaign, or a next promoted purchase campaign. And so really trying to get these first sets of wins on the board. And typically what we like to see with customers is that they are going to get in the first 12 months enough business value back out of their investment with that parity to really pay for the platform itself. And then that sets the stage for the kinds of things that, when I listen to Megan and hear her talk and hear the aspiration of Kendra, you're now starting to get to the next level of that vision, which is how do I personalize an in-store experience for that customer that's visiting me? How do I do a better job at customer support, knowing that something happened to this customer where they're valuable and I want to do something different with them on their return, or I want to do something different with them when they check in for the airline flight if they're in an airline company. So the thing we try to do is to run a use case workshop that gets short-term wins on the board, but that also sets the progress for the long term.
Awesome. And this getting a little more tactical now. This is a question that came in actually for Chris, for you, and for me. I'll kick it over to you first, and then we can answer our side of it. It has to do with householding. So we talk a lot about the customer data platform. Is there a household data platform? I had to get my cheesy joke in. But like, there's a lot of brands obviously where the household matters a lot. Particularly catalog, and, for direct mail purposes. So it's just there's a tactical question here of just, a platform like Amperity, have you already reached a point in your product development where you can sort of toggle between a couple different, ways of consolidation to offer a household view as well?
This is a question we talk about a lot with our customers, and householding is one of those terms that means lots of things to lots of people. In some cases, it means make sure that the address that I have on file is the latest mailing address for a customer so I can effectively mail to them. In some cases, it means make sure that I understand that these two individuals live at the same household so I reduce the number of direct mails that I send. In some cases, it relates to two individuals that work on the same device and I want to household them there. So the first thing we try to do with the customer is understand what form of householding they're talking about. In terms of the Amperity platform itself, we have a lot of flexibility in how we create the customer profile. So it's possible for us to create profiles that are based on individuals and then also consolidate based on mailing addresses so that you're able to have different views for different use cases. And so that's a part of the platform, which isn't just identity resolution, but it's also how you apply the business rules to the data to make sure that the right use case gets met for the right thing. A typical engagement we'll have with a customer is they'll want to send email campaigns to individuals, but mailings to households. And they want to make sure that they have the ability to do both, and you can have that capability within Amperity.
Yep, and we have a very similar side on our side, being kind of born from the marketing use cases, what you just said at the end there, Chris, about like the need for both the individual level email and then also sometimes the direct mail for where you'd want to use the householding is something that we encounter as well. So the short answer is yes, and it's done in a similar manner. There's questions about who are you using for your direct mail. There are some, most of the direct mail agencies actually will do some deduping. If you give 3 records that all have the exact same mailing address, a lot of them have evolved to the point, thankfully, that they will not actually waste and send 3 different mailers to the same house. But of course, there are other reasons that you want to do and run some analytics on a household. And so it's also common for us to have one version of looking into the data that's anchored on individual people and have another one spun up that's more anchored on households, and to be able to kind of pick and choose whether it's an insights related question, household lifetime value, or a targeting question. I think we are just up to the tail end of our time. So I want to thank you, Chris, and thank you, Megan, for sharing the story. Megan, I know I speak for Chris in saying how happy we are to play a small part in your story of helping Kendra leverage customer data, improve the customer experience, grow lifetime value. Really appreciate you sharing your time. If anyone out there has any questions for any of us, please reach out. We'll be following up with the webinar recording to everyone who signed up, and we'll include the contact information for if you have follow-up questions with Amperity, with Castora. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Chris. And look forward to chatting with a bunch of you in the near future.